All right, so we're going right ahead to number 3, FY23 budget development. And we're going to start with technology.
Did you want me to record the meeting?
Oh, Tyler,
Or is Tyler recording?
he's going to record. Do you want to start?
But it's always good to record it,
Yeah.
Okay.
just in case, I don't know.
So we're letting folks know that I'm
Yeah.
going to start recording now.
Yes, we will start recording.
Okay. And I am going to share my screen so people can see the budget presentation. We're not 100% certain that I'll be able to see folks who are wanting to join the meeting. So school committee members, you have my cell phone, I believe, and can text me if you are trying to, they would be on the meeting now anyway. Okay. I have to share.
All right, I think we're good to go. Just to sort of start the meeting, just going to kind of review a couple of things that we talked about during the overview, not in as much detail, but just kind of some highlights, particularly if somebody is new this week, so they have a little context for what we're talking about this evening. And we'll go from there. So just some things about the budget assumptions that we had, that this is a level service budget that we're presenting to you this year for FY23, which is defined as maintaining student services and supports and shifting things as they need to be depending on where students are. If they're going from the elementary to the secondary level, something might shift, that kind of thing. The level service, and I know there was a little confusion at the last meeting, level service is different than level funded. Level funded means we would not be exceeding this current year's bottom line, which would mean some pretty significant cuts. So I just wanted to make sure that, we were all clear on that definition.
David, do you have your hand up?
I do have my hand up. Due to my frequent absences, I'm unsure of the answer to this. Is this level service strategy something that this subcommittee or the school committee voted on? Or is it an administrative, as opposed to, say, a level funded budget? I just wondered if we stepped off in this direction with any discussion or how we got here. Maybe I missed it.
Judy did explain last week why they made, Judy and Patricia made these assumptions for a level service. Can you explain it simply again?
No, it's not that. It's that I understand the difference, but it seems like a policy, and policies are decided by a school committee. And so, if one did not agree with this, one could feel snookered. But I figured I just missed it, that we didn't have a discussion about whether we owe the towns a level funded budget or whether we owe the students at minimum a level services budget. We just haven't. So I'll park that. I just wanted to raise it. I didn't know the answer to it. Now I do. And I don't necessarily agree.
Okay.
Because we are the policy committee.
Yes, it's not a policy.
Right. Yeah, we just felt it was the prudent thing to do because you are in a transition moment in terms of having an interim superintendent, some other leadership shifts that are in play. And so we just wanted to, not go wild and crazy until you have an opportunity to have your settled superintendent and then begin to do some thoughtful planning and visioning for the future. And then that would drive the budget moving forward. But we just didn't feel that the time was right to do anything different.
Okay, absent service to school committee members in their function in this way. I can't support this budget so far. We haven't had this discussion. I hope that we will. And the reason I'm so uncomfortable is that so much one-time money is being used to bake a cake that will compound over the next 3 years. And I don't think we have enough information to be so committal. So I don't want to, you know, last year I used uh, procedural shenanigans to derail the sixth grade move by not supporting a budget. It takes a 2/3 affirmative vote, as Judy pointed out, I think at the last meeting, of the school committee members to pass a budget. That means we need 8 votes for it. Some of us are concerned about the long-term impact on budgets, and even as they affect the school district.
Yeah, and that's what this part of the process is about, is that, you know, if there are some things that you want to give the superintendent and us some direction about in terms of bringing back any revisions. This is an iterative process.
Right.
So the numbers you got last week are a little bit different this week because we, you know, tweaked some things along the way. We did not impact the current bottom line on the local side of the budget, but you know, certainly this is an iterative process, and your feedback certainly helps us shape that along the way. So, all right.
Oh,
We lost your connection.
Having just a little bit of a technical difficulty, and there we go. All right, all good. So the organization of the budget, and again, we talked a little bit about this last week in terms of what we call an all funds budget, which really delineates the true costs of what goes on, and then the local budget takes into consideration things that offset those true costs, and then we come up with the net budget that is the local number that you're looking at in terms of what you feel that you want to be able to share with the towns and look for an assessment from there. So the total proposed budget for FY22 is $14,851,290. The all funds budget for FY23 is $16,976,496. But after we take 1.7 million, or $1,748,574 off of that, that leaves us with a local total of $15,227,923. So an increase from local to local is $376,633, or a change of 2.54% on the local budget. And it was requested at the last meeting that we share the enrollments that drive how the assessments are calculated, which I believe everybody received via email. There's also, for those of you here in the room, there is a handout, one-page handout with those numbers on it. And this slide is just a summary of the numbers, so you can see for FY22 what the enrollments were. These are calculated per your regional agreement, which requires an average of the enrollments on October 1st and then again on December 1st. This is the number of students from each town that comprise the district. You've had a net loss of 6.6 full-time equivalencies from last year to this year. So it is a decrease in the overall enrollment. But as you can see, for example, Leiden is up a little bit, and the rest of the towns are down. So that changes the relationship between them, and it's those 5-year averages that then comprise the amount of assessment that happens. And so you can see at the very bottom of the chart, the percentage change from FY22 to FY23 in the assessment percentages by enrollment.
Judy, I'm wondering if it would be helpful to remind folks about the difference between these enrollment figures, which are foundation enrollment, and our actual number of students sitting in our classrooms.
These are actually enrollments by town that drive the assessments. There are other students, for example, students who tuition in from Vernon, but because we receive a tuition for them, they are not part of the assessment. So these are actually the students who live in the 4 towns, who actually occupy seats in our classrooms here in the district. And that's how the assessment is calculated, based on the actual enrollment that average between October 1 and December 1.
Do you have a question, Jane?
Well, I asked for those numbers, and they don't come out the same as this sheet. So I asked Pat if I should be getting corrected statistics for October 1 and December 1.
I sent you an email late this afternoon.
Yeah, and you mentioned foundation enrollment. There's no foundation enrollment in this calculation.
Right, not in the way your current regional agreement is, but your current students who are in the district, you may have some students who choice in from other towns, so they're
Right.
not counted in your assessment or enrollment.
Correct. That's what I was
Yep.
looking at. And I just didn't come up with the same numbers.
Right.
And I checked back against the reports that I got from Patricia, and they don't add up the same as yours.
Well,
You
that's
mean
because there would
previous
be students who might either be choicing in from other school districts or students who are
No, it
tuitioning
had
in.
nothing to do with choice. I strictly counted the Bernardston students, the Leiden students, the Northfield students, and the Warwick students.
Mhm.
Um,
These are numbers that we got from the October 1 and December 1 counts that are done in
Those were
district.
the counts that I asked for, but they
Yep.
aren't the same as yours, so.
Well, it's
I
an,
must have gotten a different report, and I would like to have a copy of the report that you used. Thank you.
okay, these are the numbers that come out of our student information system, and we do it by where the students actually live. So students who don't live in the 4 towns who might be attending your schools would not be counted in this number because we'd be getting revenue from other sources for them.
Not disagreeing with that. I'm not disagreeing with any of that. I'm just saying the data that I asked for doesn't add up the same as yours.
Okay. Um,
So Jane, in my email to you, I invited you to have a discussion with me, so I'd be happy to call you tomorrow and we can look at the numbers together and I'll see what appears to be incorrect.
Yes, okay,
Does that sound okay?
yeah.
All right,
I have a couple of appointments tomorrow, though, so I'll talk to you later.
we'll talk afterwards and we'll set a time that works for you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, great.
And I apologize for stepping away. We have an administrator who needs another invite, so I might step away for a second again.
No worries. Can I get you to move to the next slide? Thanks. So again, here's the summary of the assessments for the FY22 budget. That number is $9,301,748. The assessments, after we take into consideration all of the other sources of revenue that can be counted before you do the local assessments, is $9,499,089. So the change between FY22 and FY23 is an additional $197,341, or an overall change in the assessments of 2.12%. So tonight, we're going to share central office and shared services, with the exception of health. That's going to be on the March 1 agenda, and technology. So that's where we'll begin.
Okay, and I'm going to just come out of slideshow presentation
Sure.
for a minute to see if we have anyone else who's trying to get in. No. Okay?
All right. Do you want us to start with?
Go ahead, we'll go
Technology
in, we'll
or
go in this
just-
order. Yep.
Okay, all right, great. So we're going to start with curriculum and professional development. And again, the numbers that you're seeing on this particular slide, or those numbers that'll appear shortly, will be changes in the lines. So there's a new line in the curriculum coordinator budget. What we learned this year was that all of the supplies for all of the central office departments were being done through the superintendent's office supply line, and it really should be broken out by department. And if you're looking for where we are, we're on page 8 of the line-by-line budget. So the curriculum coordinator supplies, those are just general office supplies that, again, were under the superintendent's office and have been broken out for that purpose. Curriculum coordinator textbooks are some reference books that will be used for curriculum and professional development work. So that's an addition. The professional development number is down. If you remember from last week's presentation, we took $20,000 and put it into 10,000 each into the 2 elementary budgets, which is really where it belongs in terms of a cost center, and how we would also report that to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The $5,000 is also going to be paid for from SR3 for some district-wide activities, so we were able to reduce that number by quite a bit to, again, alleviate some pressure on the general fund. The shared professional resources, those are just resources that the curriculum director would be using to share amongst all of the districts, so that's a little up by a little bit, $700. The district mentoring number is down significantly, not that the expense, because if you look in the all funds column, it's still there, but it is down significantly because, again, trying to relieve pressure on the general fund. We've put those expenses off to Title IV, which is a federal grant, as well as SR2 funds. And then we have technology is next. So Chris Fontaine is here, and he's going to come up and join me, and we'll turn over the mic.
Can I ask you what page that is?
Still page 8.
Still page 8? Oh, how did I miss it? It's right under that.
Michelle, I don't know how
I
many
saw
times I've been
district
through this, and I
share.
keep finding, yeah.
Sorry.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Fontaine, the District Tech Coordinator. Just going to run through these with everyone. So we're down on the Technology Coordinator salary, new hire, that's me. We're saving a little bit there. Now our technician salary and data coordinator salaries, that's a little tricky. Basically, those two positions were compounded into one line. We're just breaking those down into 2 positions as they should be. Professional development, we've got $2,000. That's largely just for keeping up our knowledge of, hardware and software as it comes out. The reporting standards are constantly changing. Our big hitter in this list is our district technology annual subscriptions and renewals, and now what that is, that's our annual software renewals. Most of our software operates as a annual license, and we have to re-up that. The increase is there. We're looking at overhauling all 4 of our district websites, and we're also, one thing we're heavily reliant on this year was substitute workers and short-term workers, and we're looking at a system that can track that and work on tracking substitute teaching and substitute workers. And in our 2 elementary and actually all of our hardware lines, we're able to use SR2 funds to pay for that this year. Now our big hardware side this year is we have about 150 Chromebooks in the elementary side that are aging out, and we'll be able to replace those. That'll bring all of our student one-to-one Chromebooks in the district into one model. So for administration, for security updates, that's pretty important, and those Chromebooks, they won't start to age out until 2026. So those will last us quite a bit. I think that's what I have. Is there any questions?
So where there is no money or a lot less money, you're using other funds. So for next year, we will see much more of an increase if we put this back together. Is that correct?
Not an increase over what these lines have been in the past years, but yes, there will be.
Well, for example, excuse me, let's just take elementary tech hardware at $23,883, and there's nothing there. It will be close, I would think, to 25,000 or more next year.
It would not, because a majority of that is replacing those Chromebooks.
Okay,
I would expect maybe 5 to 10 next year.
Okay,
Just-
that's my
just-
question.
yeah,
And the
just-
same
just for-
for the PVRS? Okay.
Yes. So in this past year in PVRS, we did a significant Chromebook upgrade, so we're kind of just moving that over to the elementary line this year.
Well, maybe that was a bad example. The one that you were using SR2 funds in Title V, was that district tech hardware? Going from 16.5 to 5,000?
so
So
we're-
next year, it would be over 16.5 then, would be my guess.
Yeah, I would expect it to be in that area.
Okay. What I'm trying to do is to get a sense between E&D and ESSER that we're using this year, what would happen next year? That it would be such a high jump in.
The ESSER funds aren't noted on here. Is that because you're taking them out of 22 ESSER funds rather than 23?
Those funds will be used this year, so it's not an offset into next year's budget. We're actually, Chris is purchasing the equipment ahead of time, so gives
I
them
wish
the
we
gift
could
of the
find-
summer to get them ready versus August and scrambling.
I asked the same question about something last week and got the same answer. So I'd like to suggest that we have some kind of a footnote, if, or maybe another column out here that's saying we're taking it out of 22 ESSER funds.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to get at, is like, what are we going to see? Because that's,
It's defeating to use funds that
yes,
are only there.
at one time, yeah. Melissa?
That's a great point, Jane. It has a column for SR2 anticipate. Does that mean we haven't gotten SR2?
No, yeah, we have gotten ESSER too, but what we're gonna do is do it before June 30th of this year. The tech purchases are gonna happen before we roll into the next fiscal year.
No, I understand,
Yep.
but in the column where it says SR2 anticipated,
Mm-hmm.
in what Jane was talking about, couldn't you just move that into the SR2 anticipated line? To explain that's coming from SR2 as opposed to SR3, right? Like, because you were.
Shall I
Yeah.
try? Go ahead.
What we're trying to do in those columns is show offsets for FY '23.
23,
We're
yeah.
actually making the purchase now in FY '22.
Right.
So that's why it doesn't reflect there, but we can certainly put in some sort of footnote that
Okay.
would explain that.
Because I think everybody's going to ask the same.
Sure, no,
Yeah.
point well taken, great.
I have one other question, separate, unless you want to.
Did that make sense, Melissa? So for ESSER2, we are anticipating using $50,000 of that ESSER2. So ESSER2 funding spans multiple fiscal years, so we're using some of it this year. And in this iteration of the draft FY23 budget, we're anticipating using $50,000 of ESSER2 funding. Does that help clarify?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. We'll go.
Yep.
Well, yeah,
so-
a footnote would help, because
Mhm.
while it makes sense to us now, next year, we're going to be puzzled.
Right.
Yep.
That's
no.
what I'm
Or
thinking.
next week.
Next week,
So-
maybe.
So my
Or
next,
tomorrow, who knows? But, absolutely, we can do that, sure.
my next question, Chris, for the hardware, for the Chromebooks, are those by classroom or do they stay with a student?
In the elementary schools, they go by classroom, but each
Yeah.
student has, we have enough devices for every student to have one.
Okay.
And then in the high school, they stay with the student.
They follow. Okay. That's my understanding with other schools. So when you come here, you get your Chromebook,
Yep.
stays with you throughout the school year. So then you're only buying each year like just a class size, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And now, and like I said, these Chromebooks that we're purchasing, we're gonna have one level model, Dell 3100s. It's kind of like the educator standard.
Yep.
And those will not start aging out until 2026.
And are you, not, I don't want to say over purchasing, but the numbers that you're estimating to purchase?
We do have enough to cover incoming
Incoming, okay.
students. Yep.
That was my question.
Yep. I mean, with that, for the next few years, I would not anticipate our hardware costs to be anywhere near they have in the last couple of years. With the one-on-one rapid switch with COVID, we had to upgrade our systems here pretty rapidly to accommodate all that. So
Right.
the budget took a hit.
David, do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So on this slide with the 7 items, it's fairly clear to me that the data coordinator salary was, recognizing a functionality, what somebody is doing that was misclassified. So there's really not much budget. The 23,000 offsets 24. In that case, we're recategorizing things. And then for the elementary and Pioneer Tech, we're using one-time funds to offset one-time expenses, or relatively. We don't buy those computers for everybody every year. So what I'd find helpful would be wherever we are using one-time funds to support our normal budget and things that we're going to want to fund next year, even though we might not have the one-time money. It would be helpful to know, what's our exposure there. So some of these changes just represent recognizing cost centers. Some of them represent meeting one-time or capital type expenses or things that won't necessarily be occurring in next year's budget. And it'd be helpful to know how much we're propping up our next year's budget with money that's not going to be recurring.
All right, sure. We can make those notations. All right, so we'll move right along to shared services. We have a new line in this, thanks, Chris. We have a new line in this department for English language learner teachers. They have been previously charged to a special education line, but English language learners is not a special education service. It is a regular education service. So we've broken it out and given them their own line so that it can be charged appropriately. The shared teachers travel, we felt that needed to be increased, that it was previously not funded at the level that it should be. There was a request for potentially for an art teacher salary that was in last year's budget that was not filled, and there was no need to do that, so we decreased that line accordingly. And then another regular education service that we need to budget for is translation services. For those families whose first language is not English, obviously any print materials that go home need to be translated into the language of the home, as well as if they come to parent-teacher conferences or student who's on a special education individual ed plan. If the parents come to a meeting, sometimes you have to have an interpreter present as well. So we believe that 5,000 will cover the translation services that are necessary. And they really should be part of the regular education budget and not the special education budget. Any question on that part of it?
Melissa?
About the art teacher, no need. Does that mean the art teacher was posted, it wasn't filled, and so now we're not going to offer?
No, I think this had to do with a position initially that became a hybrid position in this building, I think art and health. I want to get confirmation again, but I believe it is the case that we actually they built the budget with excess capacity for teachers, and we ended up not needing that position in order to meet contractual requirements for having kids in classes. I'm not saying this right. Am I remembering this one right? This is the
Yes.
position that we
Right.
put into the budget, we didn't actually need in the budget,
Right,
and is therefore coming out.
right.
Was this due to the sixth grade transition? Because I remember sixth grade was planning on coming up,
Mhm.
and one of the big things that was identified in that process was an art teacher
Right.
would be hired
Mhm.
because there'd be enough students to serve. So I guess what I'm asking now is, since that didn't happen, do we still have an art teacher that is here? Like,
Yes, we have 1.5.
right, that's continuing to
Yes.
serve
Mhm,
all the needs that we have.
mhm.
I think that's what this is from, that's going
A
to be.
remnant
Yes,
of the grade
yes,
6.
yeah.
Okay,
That was one of the positions that was identified as a need for additional
Mhm.
staffing
Mhm.
if six
Right.
had gone
Right.
up.
And
Okay.
since
Okay.
then, and since that's not happening next year, obviously, those
Right,
funds are
right.
not
Yeah,
needed, so
yeah,
we're able to
yeah.
decrease.
Processing out loud. That's six, figured it out. Got it.
okay.
Okay,
All right,
all right.
we'll move
No.
on.
No, I'm not sure actually that's accurate, because this
Okay.
is shared teacher services. Now this, and I should know this
Oh,
cold, but I don't. This is shared. This is not a PVRS position. So
But
I
I-
actually want to go back and
Yeah.
look at this.
If memory serves, and some days it serves better than others, let's put it that way. But if memory serves, I think it was somebody who was going to take care of the sixth grade and maybe do a little in the district as well. So I think it was because the sixth grade wasn't coming up. I
I
don't
think
have
this,
all the details, but yeah, we can.
this is also possibly a partial result from the cleaning up we have done of the location of actual staff salaries in different cost centers. I think we've mentioned before, we had some folks who were incorrectly listed as being at BES, for instance, when they were working here. So through the budget development process, we've been combing through staff lists and locating folks more accurately. So I think this is actually more likely to be
Yeah.
that
Could- yeah.
situation.
Thank you.
But I'll do a little forensic
Yeah,
looking
thank
and get back to you.
All right. Transportation. So if you look at the all funds numbers for transportation, also on page 8, the contract that you have with Guzmescus is, requires a 2.5% increase every year. So that contract is up by that amount of money, and that's how it was calculated based on the percentages of students at the elementary level versus the percentage of students at the secondary level. We are going to offset that with transportation, the elementary number with transportation revolving, which you can't hang on to for a super long amount of time. So it's $191,795 that will offset that. The Pioneer Valley transportation shows that increase both on the all funds and the local level so that you can see that. Special needs transportation is actually up by $21,792 on the all funds side. Again, here's another fund that we have to expend. We can't hang on to it for a long period of time, and that's the Circuit Breaker Fund. That's state funding that goes for extraordinary special education expenses that the state puts out every year. They are now starting to allow transportation to be one of the areas that you can help fund from those numbers. So basically what you do is you spend a year in arrears. So this year, we're getting 146,000 and change in that circuit breaker fund, 24,000, 255, excuse me, of which is transportation reimbursement. So we took that portion of the circuit breaker, put it against special needs transportation, so therefore, again, it eliminated some pressure on the general fund. The interdistrict elementary to PVRS transportation covers the sixth grade step-up day to this building. And so, again, an offset in rural aid. We have learned that the governor's budget does have the same rural aid number as the number we got this year, which is $116,000. That's been level funded. So we put that number against rural aid. The net from local to local is down by $88,932. And if we're good, I'll move on. School security. The FY22 amount, I know this came up as a question, reflects the signed agreement with the town of Northfield. And basically, the signed agreement says that it will fund, that we will fund 50% of the salary of the school resource officer up to $29,523. So obviously, we budget the maximum, so we have that. We added a 2% adjustment because that seems to be a pretty typical pay increase, so that the funds are secured. There has not been an agreement, brought forward or signed for FY23. So again, just trying to use a number that makes some sense there. All right, school committee. That's on page 1 of the line-by-line budget. The first item is the financial overseer. And basically, the initial piece in the special legislation said that the financial overseer would be available for 3 years, but it also allows the commissioner of elementary and secondary education to have the authority to extend the stay of that person. So I guess from my understanding, what was budgeted for this fiscal year was a couple of $1,000s because you thought you'd be done by October, and the commissioner has said no, that that needs to stay in place. So the amount of $15,000 for next year was a number that we got through from the financial overseer. That was the commissioner's recommendation to budget for FY23.
And do we know how long?
No, I've spoken with Rick about this. Rick Kingsley will actually be departing as our financial overseer. The commissioner will be appointing a new fiscal overseer. I believe Rick has identified someone that he would recommend to the commissioner. And again, exactly what Judy said. The district budgeted for just a few months, thinking that the legislation allowed or required only 3 years, and I have the legislation with me. That's not what the legislation says. If the commissioner so desired, if he felt that the district were not making sufficient progress with its finances, the commissioner has the authority to set up a finance control board that has powers far exceeding those of the fiscal overseer. So the district doesn't have much choice here. It would be either funding the fiscal overseer or saying to the commissioner, we'd like a finance control board, which I'm sure we're not. I hope.
Wait a minute, what are the benchmarks? Because I remember this all being said, that the reason we budgeted 2,000 was because, I mean, I never saw anything in writing, that's for sure, but, so we don't know how long we're going to have to pay for a financial overseer going
Could be
forward?
the length of the loan. Could be the length of the loan.
Well, the commissioner has the right, if the commissioner has the right, even when the loan is paid, I believe, to install a finance control board.
But the question is the benchmark, yeah.
So here, I'll read from the special legislation. Not less than 3 years after the appointment of a fiscal overseer, while debt issued under this act is outstanding, so there's one benchmark. If the commissioner, in consultation with the director, determines that the district has taken the necessary steps to achieve long-term sustainability and no longer requires active oversight, the commissioner may authorize the district to terminate the employment of the fiscal overseer. So to me, I understand that as meaning after 3 years of having a fiscal overseer in place, if the commissioner believes that we have our house in order financially, the commissioner could say, nope, you don't need a financial overseer anymore, we're done with that. I'll read further. If at any time the commissioner believes that a finance control board should be established, now that's at any time, right? That's not in relation to the commissioner in consultation may recommend that the secretary establish such a board. And then there's quite a bit of language about the powers of that. Yep, then there's language about fiscal years during which bonds or notes remain outstanding. So we can have Russell review this again. For now, while we have a loan with the state, my understanding is we either have a fiscal overseer or the commissioner could recommend to the Secretary of Education that they install a finance control board.
That wasn't what I thought was going forward. Anyways, Jane, did you have a
If we had a
question?
letter from Desi or from our current overseer stating that we need to do this. We have a letter.
Do we have I have not seen anything
A letter
pertaining to
stating,
the extension.
Well,
I mean,
last year we knew that Kingsley was going to be done. He
Yes.
told us that.
he did tell
But
us
then,
that.
of course, all the personnel in the district at the administrative level changed.
Right.
So that could have changed their minds. I'm asking, where's the official notification?
Right, that's what I'm wondering
Them
too,
taking it.
because I haven't seen anything pertaining to that.
I'll ask Rick to write something or to get something from Desi.
Or from Desi, yeah.
Well, you shouldn't have to ask for it. They should be telling us.
And if they sent it, just have them resend it.
Okay.
Oh, you lost your connection again.
Chris, could this be the rain?
Good thing the tech director is here.
Yeah.
Little did you know.
You never know what the rain is gonna do.
So while we're waiting,
Mhm.
the financial overseer cost, is there like a set amount that they give, that we're charged?
It's an
Yeah.
hourly rate, and in, off the top of my head, I don't know what that is, but I can certainly find that out.
So they were just budgeting for the last year for 2,000, thinking that we would be released, is what
yes.
I'm
Right.
following along.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We're not being released, and so you're
Right.
budgeting for 15,000, thinking that will be what will be billed.
Right.
Is that,
That's not very
Base.
many hours.
no, I know, so if I go back and I look at 21, 20, and look at expenses there, that would, I would assume somewhat be around that 15,000
No,
Yeah.
from past?
I thought it was much more than that when
I
we
think it
first
started
started.
out higher than that.
Yeah, I thought it was
Came down
45.
fast.
I thought it was 45.
It's the
Well,
top of the range that Rick Kingsley recommended for next
Mhm.
fiscal year.
Okay.
Oh, hey.
Says it's connecting.
Join now.
For those of you at home, we're having technical difficulties. We lost
Oh
connection.
dear, we just lost David.
Oh, I see people.
Oh, there you go. Looks like you're back.
There
And
you
you
go.
are. Great, super. All right, so that covers the financial overseer piece of it. I'm going to just draw your attention to the negative $33,180 in the school committee expense line. And I know there were some questions about what was actually in the full school committee expense line. And when we first got here, I did look at it, and it was kind of a hodgepodge of a lot of different things, and I thought, well, maybe that's the way they, they do things here. When the question was posed, I went back in and looked at it again, and there really are expenses that should be broken out in other places. So some of the changes in the school committee lines will reflect where that $33,000 went, and there will be a big one in the finance section, which is the audit. And the audit of the books really should be in the finance, business and finance section of the budget, not the school committee section of the budget. So we'll be creating lines to break those expenses out, and it also will help with, for the purposes of recording expenditures in the appropriate places to the department that we do at the end of the year. So one of the things that was in that school committee expense line was the school committee recording secretary. So I did pull apart 3 years' worth of expenses to take a look at the kinds of monies that were being allotted to different things. So I did put 2,000 in. That seems to be a good number for the amount of meetings that you have that are then paid out as a stipend. The school committee dues and memberships was also tucked into that giant expense line. Those cover your memberships to the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, and also your membership as a district and Franklin County Tech. So that's what that number is. So that obviously has, all of that has dropped the school committee expense line. So really there's a number that's paid out to food service for a variety of little things at 200, seems to cover that pretty well. So that's why that change was made. So again, it gives them a more transparent level of letting the public know, what those expenses are for as well. So, we felt it was a good idea to, make that a little more transparent. The special reserve contribution is up quite a bit, and that's because of the special legislation in Section 6V of that legislation. It requires that for FY23 and beyond, that the amount of money set aside for that purpose is 1.5% of the prior year's budget. So it'll be 1.5% of the 14 million and such this year. And that's up from 1%. You've been over time sort of getting wherever, and it's been by quarter percents. This time it's a 0.5% jump. So that's why it's that much more. So that makes the net addition in the school committee side at $33,408.
What,
Yeah.
what's that money for?
That's set aside in a special fund as a reserve in the legislation, so that you have a reserve.
It's a savings account that the
Yeah.
state made us begin
Yep,
as part of the agreement to lend us money.
Right.
And so over time, again, I'm looking at a copy of the special legislation. Starting with fiscal year 2019, the district was required to start setting aside money in this line. So in 2019, it had to be an amount equal to 0.25% of the gross budget for the prior fiscal year. And then the following year, it went up to 0.5%, 0.75%, 1%, and now, as Judy said, 1.5%. But we don't have to put in that much each year. What we need to do is get ourselves cumulatively to that amount. So if we don't touch the special reserve account, and last year we put in 1% to get us up to 1.5%, it's a 0.5% contribution.
Yep.
And again, it's essentially a savings account so that we have something in the bank, as it were, moving forward.
Do we know how much is in there?
That's my question.
off the top of my head, I don't, but I can get that number for you.
Okay.
So this 79,000 is the 1.5%.
Of
We may
the
not need to put
FY20.
that much in because it's the total that's in there that we have to look at.
No, the contribution for next year has to be 1.5% of the prior year's budget.
Because of the special legislation
Right.
that was just passed.
Mhm.
I know, but there's a clause
Right.
about total
Yeah, but-
in the account.
Okay.
And then I'm assuming in order to use that money in the savings account, there's specific guide, or is it just untouchable? Yeah, okay.
Transfers or expenditures may be authorized from the supplemental reserve fund of a fiscal year during that fiscal year only, and then only by the school committee with the approval of the commissioner, et cetera. There's various things.
Mhm.
You know what, I'm going to put a link to the special legislation on our budget development
Yeah,
webpage.
that would be great.
I would
How's that?
like that.
Yeah, right?
Yep,
Um,
then everybody
we'll-
knows
Right.
what the rules are that we have
Yeah.
to work under. And I will get the number in the fund.
And I'm making a note that it might be time for, I'm not sure which subcommittee of the school committee, to do a group reading of the special legislation again, so that we're certain that the entire school committee is aware of what's in it. You know,
Yeah.
it's been a few years.
That's true, there's
Mhm.
some new
Important.
committee members.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
So on to the superintendent's office. We did put in a little bit of a cost of living adjustment that by no means obligates anybody to anything. It's just a placeholder in there. You know, because obviously, the committee will have to make some decisions about, once you make a decision about who your settled superintendent will be and negotiation of salary and whatever, but it was just to make sure that there was a placeholder for some cost of living. When I looked at professional administration dues and subscriptions, we were able to save a little money there just based on looking at a history of expenditures over the past 3 years, and not quite as much was needed. We reduced the superintendent office supplies because we're trying to distribute that among the departments versus having everything come out of the superintendent's office supplies. Rental and lease of equipment has to do with new leases on copiers and postage machines and whatever, and a little bit of an uptick there. So that's the increase in the superintendent's office.
It's only the machines in the superintendent's office, not copiers in the two elementary.
No. All right, in the area of business and finance, the salary reflects the school committee vote of $125,000 maximum for that position. And last year it was budgeted, for this year it was budgeted at $98,000 and such, so that's that. The audit, that will be a new line, that's coming out of that school committee expense line, and that's where the bulk of that expense will live moving forward, is in the business and finance area. Director of Finance Conference and Travel, that allows for the Director of Finance to be a member of the Massachusetts Association of School Business Officials. The membership fee includes attendance at their annual conference as well as other professional development opportunities that go on. So that covers that, plus any other travel that might impact the Director of Finance. Business office supplies, what we have discovered in talking with the folks in the business office is that they really haven't been ever fully funded in the way that they should be. There are envelopes, there are checks, there are tax forms, there are all sorts of things that they have to purchase. So this is an amount that we feel would certainly staff supply the business office in the way that it needs to be supplied.
How have they been paying for them now?
We've been paying for them out of the superintendent's office supply line, but we're finding that that's not always a sufficient amount of money to be able to ensure that the extra resources for checks and envelopes to send checks to vendors and all of that stuff really needs to be. All right, we'll move on to legal counsel, and this will be the last of it. In FY22, the amount is $17,515. That's been an amount that has been relatively stagnant over time. When the Duperets looked at, amounts of time, they have requested that we put in an increase to the retainer to $24,000, which is $2,000 a month, which is unlimited access to them. And if you're gonna do, billable hours, you're talking $250 to $400 an hour. So it's kind of like, you save up all your phone calls and make
Right.
all your issues and make one happy phone call, because every single call is, a billable hour or some piece thereof. So, the Duperets are certainly not making a bucket load of money in this increase, but it really reflects more completely the support that they provide to the district, particularly with the special legislation and such. So you're getting good value for your dollar with that. And that brings to a conclusion this particular part of the budget. So any other questions or feedback that people have?
I don't have any. I don't see any hands up there.
I'll stop presenting so that we can go back.
All right.
Hi, Lois.
Okay, so we meet again next week, and next week
Yep.
we'll take a look at Pioneer Valley Regional School and athletics. We'll take a look at health services and special needs. Those will be the big items for discussion. Any feedback in terms of, just on my to-do list, about putting in footnotes with regard to anything that might be an SR2 pre-July 1, which is really the technology stuff, that I can do. And then the number for the special legislation was what's in that account right now, which I can look up for you. And I think Patricia has a couple of other to-do tasks as well. Anything I missed on things that you need from me before next week?
I have a,
Yes, Jen.
I noticed that the maintenance of buildings, contracts and supplies, in both elementary schools have been decreased with past iteration budget.
Actually, it was evened out a little more, and that was with feedback from Gretchen, who had taken a look at town contributions to the two schools and whatnot, so she felt as though that was an appropriate adjustment to make.
You mean since last week?
Yes.
Yeah, we shifted some funds so that it's more evenly distributed between the two schools. And again, that was based on the feedback that I got from the facilities director, who felt that that was an appropriate shift to make.
Okay.
We were emailed a revised budget a couple days ago. And
okay.
so I went through it to see, and it was the maintenance. There was some, there was changes between Bernardston and Northfield and the maintenance lines,
Right.
as Jane said.
Right.
That was the change.
Yeah.
I would only my suggestion actually to that
Mm-hmm.
would be if there would be a note,
Okay.
like to the top, because when I got the draft edit, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to be looking at to see the
Okay.
edit, and I was hoping to say, look at, or
Yes.
edits
Okay.
changed here.
Sure.
That would be really
Yeah,
helpful as we
no,
move
I can put
forward.
together, if,
Okay.
again, as we continue to refine
Yeah.
numbers and make
Yeah.
sure that we've got everything that we
Yeah.
need to have included, certainly,
Mhm.
if there are changes that come out before next week's meeting, I'll happily put a cover memo with that for you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Actually, the one I was questioning is the maintenance of buildings, contracting and supplies, and it was originally budgeted for each school at $30,500. And now it's budgeted at $22,500 for each school. So I'm wondering what changed there.
Again, that was with feedback from the facilities director,
So, you don't know.
with regard to, what she felt was the more appropriate number for both schools. And she's the one out there doing it, so.
Yeah.
And am I right, we have a building, do
Yeah.
you want to remind folks?
Yeah,
Because that's
so-
such an exciting development.
So, we will be scheduling, I was gonna check with your schedule, Jane, after this meeting, and Michelle. We are going to be scheduling a building and grounds subcommittee meeting, that will include a tour of Bernardston, and review the budget that Gretchen has proposed for next year and looking at the maintenance items. And so I've taken a survey of the budget subcommittee members first to see like what their availability is based on last week's conversation. And so I was just gonna check with you guys after this to see if their availability matches with yours. And then we'll be scheduling that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, there are no more questions or anything to go before this committee? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
Okay, roll call?
Melissa Gary Bernardston, yes?
Tim Bell, yes.
David?
David Young, yes.
And Michelle Jeruso Leiden, yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you next week.
Thank you, everyone.